And welcome back to another episode of Pokemon Knowledge. Now, there's one word that gets thrown around this hobby just as much as about any other words in this hobby, and it's the word fair. I try to never use this word on my channel because I feel like it gets thrown around too much, but I've been listening to people and they've been using this word over and over and over again. Everybody's fearful of the Pokemon market, and I don't really get it. And I would say the reason I don't really get it is because this market, historically speaking, today is still one of the hottest markets we've ever seen. Maybe it's not 2020, 2021 hype, but you could even make the argument that it is just as strong. It's just the issue we're running into right now is potentially just that how much of this is being printed is just doing a little bit better of a job that maybe meeting up with the demand that is currently in this hobby. But even that is maybe a stretch. I just feel like that word fear. But you know what? It's a clickbaity word. It's going to get people to click on your video. It's the same way as I put on the title of this video. You get people to click. But, it's funny. Fear isn't even one of the seven deadly sins. And to be honest with you, when you think about the seven deadly sins, you can make a Pokemon video on every single one of those seven deadly sins, whether it's sloth, pride, greed, lust, envy, gluttony, or wrath. And there's a couple of those really hit Pokemon. But fear is even one of those seven deadly sins. But I do believe when you think about it, in this hobby, like, why are people fearful? Like, if you broke it down and you peeled it back to the most core reason why, I think a lot of people instantly would say, well, maybe people are just fearful because they are financially vested in this hobby. Like, let's be honest with each other. Nothing in this hobby is cheap, respectively, right? Like, everything in this hobby has some sort of dollar amount to it. Everybody is financially vested into this hobby. So, if you have all these people that are financially vested, they could just be fair with house's money in this aspect. They might just be playing with their own money. So, if you have people in this hobby that are just over financially leveraged, it can be really, really tough. But yeah, so I think that's just the main thing. The main thing is just simple that people are financially leveraged in this hobby. They're just so worried about the price of their cards going down. They just don't know how to handle it. I think that's the core. But I think it even goes one layer beyond that. And what do I mean by that? Yes, people are worried about their money, but I think what the reality is people just realize that it's possible that we've seen the greatest hype period of Pokemon and potentially the greatest hype period we will ever experience. And I think a lot of people could point to certain aspects or certain periods of time and they could point to where hype is the highest. There's real easy like outliers. 1999, introductory of Pokemon, base set Jungle Fossil. Everybody could point to that one moment. And then Pokemon Go, that was a little like blip on the radar, and everybody could kind of point to Pokemon Go and say this is when a lot of people got back. But I think is what happens is everybody sort of looks back so fondly now at 2020, 2021, because if you think about it, it was, I don't even know how they explain it. It's a euphoric feel. Like the way you talk about 2020, the way you talk about 2021, the amount of hype, the amount of demand, the amount of just sheer interest that was in this hobby in 2020 and 2021. I think that's what everybody's fear is, because the only reason you're going to feel fear that you're going to lose money in this hobby is because you fear that the hype is going to die. And I think what it just simply comes down to is just people are so fearful that 2020 and 2021 are just not repeatable. I think that's what it boils down to. So I think it's tough. I think sometimes we have to pull ourselves back, pull ourselves out of a moment, and sort of like realize when you are like currently in something very special. And what my fear is that people just look at 2020 and 2021 and it's going to be on such this crazy high pedestal that people are just going to say, this is never repeatable. And I think that is the biggest danger right there. And I think that's honestly what people are most fearful, because if they say, well, the best is behind us, what is the future going to be? Because if the best is behind you, that means that the future can never have a moment as good as the past. And when you think about that, when you break it down to the absolute core, that is kind of a scary sentence to say, that the best times are behind us. While I don't personally really believe that that is true, I can at least see the merits to that argument. I can see where people can say 2020, 2021, perfect storm. We came into the pandemic, everybody was shut in, everybody was home, nobody was doing anything. Everybody just started to have all this like free capital because nobody was going out to the movies, nobody was going out to eat. And when people go into their darkest times, and I think for the shutdown, that was a dark time for a lot of people, in your darkest time, you try to find that one light. And that one light can be as simple as something from your childhood, something that brought you a ton of joy. And then when you rediscover that, you realize, like, oh, wow, there's this big world out there, and all these people love this thing that I used to love as a child, but look at the way these people are interacting with this. Look at the passion they have for this. This is something I can relate to. This is something I want to get back into. And when I left Pokemon because maybe I grew out of Pokemon and Pokemon stopped being cool, well, guess what? You're older now. You don't got to worry about what anybody thinks. And to be honest with you, when you might have grew out of Pokemon and Pokemon stopped being cool, well, guess what? Now that you're older, Pokemon's cool again. And all the cool kids are doing Pokemon. At least in my opinion, all the cool kids are doing Pokemon. But I think that's the fear. People look back on that timeline and they go, perfect storm, never repeatable. And if that is people's fear, they're going to say, well, what does the future bring? The future constantly brings, like, just worse and worse situations. Things just keep compounding. Things just get worse. Things never get better. And I think that is, when you break it down, people's biggest fear. And I hope that there is a way people are able to, like, get out of that mindset and be able to kind of pull themselves out of 2020, 21 and look at it for what it was, but say, are we in a better spot today in 2023 than we were in 2020, 2021? And my answer to that is, of course, we're in a better spot. I think a problem is a lot of, like, a little bit of the pullbacks we're seeing in the market. Like, anybody you talk to at Collecticon, it seemed like a consensus through most people there where it was really tough to sell slabs. I personally didn't really have that problem. I do feel a lot of my slabs were maybe a little bit more niche. They were lower price points. It was, like, more enticing for maybe people to buy. But from everybody I talked to, it seemed like maybe slab sales were a little bit slower. The raw card market was great, and shout out to, like, Retrospecs and stuff. And Retrospecs went on, I don't even know how many different lives, how many different videos, just talking about sitting next to people that brought binders with them, and all these guys were printing in them. When Retro went to Collecticon, he brought his own binder and he printed with that binder. And, like, Charlotte's not a new thing. It's not like Charlotte started everybody going after raw. It's like this weird cyclical cycle we're going through. The signs were there, and it goes all the way back to Denver Collecticon. Trust me, I promise you. As I walked around that Denver Collecticon floor, I was looking at what was selling, what people were asking for. But I promise you, I walked by Swami's table many a times, and there was a lot of people walking by Swami's table doing exactly that, picking up the raw cards. I saw what Swami was doing, and I said, there's something there for raw. That is not personally, like, the area of the market I like to dabble in, but I think that's the fear, right? People are like, well, everybody's just moving to raw now. The buying demand for these slabs is getting a little tougher, but I think it's not the buying demand. I think the problem is for a lot of people, it's just the competition that exists today versus any other timeline in this hobby. There's just so much more competition. The thing I love to do more than anything else is I love to play that absolute quickest possible race to the bottom. How quickly can I grade as many of these cards as possible and just, ride that card, get it to market as quick as possible, so I'm hopefully selling at the highest possible point, and I'm going to keep selling that card into the market until potentially I might be the one selling that card at the lowest price in the market. As long as, even at the lowest price in the market, I'm still making money on that card. Like, that's what I like to do. A lot of people, that race to the bottom sounds terrible. You want to race, get to market right away, and then you still want to hope you're making money all the way down until eventually you find wherever that card potentially bottoms out, and you still want a margin to be there? Well, my answer is yes. Some people might say, that sounds absolutely, one, terrifying, and two, not fun at all. But that's something I like to do. But the problem is even that play, that absolute race to the bottom. I'll tell you something I didn't really get into, like the Nagaba evolutions. A lot of people were doing that play. That was just something I kind of sat back from. One, luckily I almost tried playing that play. I got a bunch of pre-orders in. They all got canceled. By the time my pre-orders got canceled, it was a decent amount of cards, and I was just like, you know what? I'm not going to pay double what I was going to originally pay with my original pre-orders. I'm kind of just going to sit back. And if you guys have been listening to these videos, that is one of the reasons I've never one time mentioned those cards. That is the reason why none of those cards were brought with me to Charlotte Collecticon. That is the reason why none of those cards are on any of my eBay pages. Like, because I just never did the play. Now, I knew that play was going to have margins, but I'm actually, in a way, watching that play with some of the most amazing ways I'm watching stuff and just saying, I knew it was going to be a race to the bottom, but my God, how optimized the race to the bottom was is amazing. Like, it played out exactly, like you could have wrote it down exactly on paper. How do I think this play is going to work out? Well, I think this play is going to work out very simple. You're going to have a lot of people are going to grade these cards with CGC right off the bat, and you're going to see a lot of those CGCs be first to market. The Beckett Black Label, the few people that try to do that Black Label premium, those Black Labels are going to sell for crazy premiums until eventually, given enough time, until those bulk returns from PSA come back. And then we'll start to see the market even out. The CGCs will sell for less than the PSA 10s, and the Beckett Black Labels are going to sell for crazy. Anything that wasn't a Black Label wouldn't really be worth it to send to Beckett at that point. It would probably be better off of just doing really quick first to market on CGC, or maybe just kind of holding off and getting a little bit of that PSA premium, opposed to trying to sell maybe a 9.5 or a 9 from Beckett. You could have wrote it on a piece of paper. Like, that play played out exactly like that. Just the way I explained it, exactly how that play played out. The only bad thing is the timelines that happened were damn near to the minute. Meaning, as quick as you could do the CGC, as quick as you could do the Beckett, and as quick as you can get those bulk submissions back from PSA. And by the time that last play trickled in, those PSA submissions, you looked at what everything was selling for, and you know what? There's not a lot of meat left on that bone at that point, And to be at the end of that play, you look at the bottom of the line when you're getting back your PSA submissions, and there's very little meat left on the bone. There was a lot of opportunity cost that might have been kind of wasted during that entire play for it to play out for you. And the problem is like that play dries up just because in the past maybe there was only a handful of people doing that. Let's just say 5 people. I want to say 10 people, but to be honest with you, like, there wasn't really 10 people doing that play in the past. It always seems like it was kind of just you and maybe 2-3 other people, and you can name them. You could go on their eBays, and you knew exactly who was doing that play, and you just like, you not more or less mother effing that guy, but you were mumbling, and you're just like, I like, if it wasn't for this one guy, or if it wasn't for this 2 guys, that play would be so beautiful. I wouldn't have any sort of barrier for this play. It's just because 2 people are screwing me over, making this play a little bit tougher, and that's how it used to be. So like I said, when it was maybe 5 people doing that play, it wasn't 10. But now it's not 10 doing it. It's not 15. It's not 20. It seems like it's 100. That's what it feels like. Like, when you go and you look at all the listings and you look at all the sellers' names, you're like, I don't know any of these sellers. I don't know what they're selling. They're only selling these cards. They're only doing this play. So because that play is so ultra optimized by so many people now, just the competition is that much stronger. So when you say the overall slab market, it's like, well, not really. Like, you still have, where you used to only have like enough meat on the bone to feed 5 people, like, healthily. Now you have enough meat on the bone for at least 100 different people, what it seems like, to get a little bit of scraps. Now that's a problem, right? So now we went from everybody eating off the bone, having their fill, to now, if anything, you might get lucky and you get a couple scraps for some of these plays. But that doesn't affect like the actual buying. The amount of demand that is required to eat up that much extra supply is important, and that demand is actually there to eat up that much more of that supply. But the problem is there's just not much there. So I think people are taking these like very small indicators, and they're just kind of like doing that more fearful mentality, right? And it goes back to, well, in 2020, 2021, it was so much easier to do this stuff. And I think it's just people constantly go back to where, yes, the dollar amount is involved, but they keep going back to, well, maybe that was like the golden age. Maybe that was the best possible the time to do some of this stuff. And to be honest with you, I don't have a perfect answer. And then it's on the other end, too. I see a lot of people like who are pack openers and stuff, and you listen to the way they describe stories. They say, especially like guys that are mainly the whatnot people, the people who are doing the big breaks. You know, when they were originally on whatnot, these very first people in that 2020, 2021, you listen to how they were selling packs and you listen to the premiums they were selling these packs for. It could have been a Vivid Voltage pack selling for $12 because you couldn't go onto the store and pick up a Vivid Voltage. Like, and they talk about this timeline like with such nostalgia and like this just almost as if it's a mythical timeline in this hobby, and they talk about that as if it's unrepeatable. So I listen to the way these people talk, and then I'm like, okay, so it's not just the guy doing the packs, it's also the guy doing the sealed product route. But then it just takes a little bit too, and then you dive in, you peel back the layer, and you hear their argument, and you go, well, listen, you said you in the crazy boom, which is 2020, 2021, you said you were selling a Vivid Voltage pack at $12 because people couldn't go into their local Walmart or Target and buy it. And they go, yeah. And then you ask them the same question. Well, what was competition like on whatnot at the time? And then it's the same way as all the problems people are having selling slabs. It's like, well, there wasn't any competition on whatnot. So that it keeps boiling back down to the competition is just a little bit greater now. And it's the same way. So it's like, okay, well, why can't you sell those same Vivid Voltage packs for $12 now today? And their answer just comes, well, you got 100 different sellers on whatnot. There was never 100 different sellers on whatnot. And it's just like, okay, so your complaint and your fear is the same fear as people are having, selling slabs on eBay. It's the same way as people's fears are selling sealed product. It's just the demand is still there, because the only way you're going to have demand where you could even possibly have 100 sellers on whatnot is you got to have a ton of people on there buying. But it's just because now they're so spread out, it just feels like the sales aren't as good. It feels like the market isn't as strong. But I think it's just like, these are small indicators. But the problem is what I think is going to come into the future eventually is I think we're going to start to see a consolidation in a lot of the sellers on eBay. And what I mean by that is not just consigning of seller or like condensing of sellers on eBay selling. I think we're also going to see that on like Whatnot and all these platforms too, because as those margins dry up, there's only going to be a few people around that are going to still be able to work at more razor thin margins and still be able to operate on a high level. And to be honest with you, it kind of boils down to those that were there before this all started, stayed around while this was happening, made a ton of money, and guess what? When all this kind of slows down, they will still be standing in the end. And I think there will definitely be some people that were, joined in the middle, and they will be there in the end. But I think we're just going to see like a consolidation phase. I think, like, I'll give you a perfect example. 151. One of the complaints I've heard a lot about 151, and to be honest with you, a complaint I've heard recently with a lot of sets is just condition of cards. And why does condition of cards truly, truly matter? Well, it doesn't matter if you're selling on TCG Player or Near Mint, because even though these cards have a little bit of whitening, they're far from light play. But the problem is while they're Near Mint, they're not Gem Mint. And what does Gem Mint mean? It means, well, you can't really do that great in play. So the people that were trying to do that great in play, saying, okay, every single modern set, I'm going to just do what is probably like one of the easiest things to do in this hobby is just grade the hits. And to be honest with you, to say that one simple line is just to grade the hits has actually, if you looked at it like throughout the last 5 years of this hobby, is a pretty easy formula to show success in this hobby. Just grade the hits. And the problem is 151, Obsidian Flames, Paldea Evolved, a lot of Scarlet and Violet base. You couldn't really grade the hits on those because print quality was just pretty dog shit. Like, we've seen poor print quality on other sets in the past, but now we're starting to see it stack up. Now, this is a weird thing about 151. I have heard some kind of anecdotal stuff where it seems like there's just major batching issues going on with 151. So batching issues with two issues going on. One, it seems like people that are pulling hits are pulling a ton of hits, and the people that are not pulling hits seem to have more or less like 1 out of 6, 1 out of 8, just a bunch of dud packs in between. It definitely seems like there might be a little bit of batching issue going on with 151, but there is definitely a batching issue going on with 151 with print quality too. It seems like, and for whatever reason, those people that for some reason have the packs with no hits in it seem to just have the worst luck too, where all their packs also have some of the worst quality control issues from some of these cards. And then I'm seeing some people open a ton of hits with good quality control, but this is a problem. Like, that leaves a bad taste in people's mouths. You know, you're great when your bread and butter is doing the most simplest of plays in this hobby is just grade the hits, and you are unable to grade the hits because, one, if you are trying to, you know, do the once in a while pull it yourself, send a card away for grading for fun, you can't do that. But the bigger thing is if you're starting to source those cards raw and you're trying to source raw, really source in mass, you know, it could be 50, 100, 200 of a single card, and then your sole purpose would you get like 50 to 100 near mint cards from TCG Player. You go through the best, you'd pull out the best, you'd send those cards away for grading. The ones that were not really worth it to be graded, you would send them away for raw. When that play more or less dries up in a sense, because, well, and especially for 151, that play is not just drying up from that quality control issue too, but you can just go on TCG Player and look at how many of these cards are really selling. You know, shout out to Mason Cardinal Game, and had a great video the other day talking about 151, where he went on TCG Player and he just showed the sheer quantity of cards for a 151, a set that is more or less being mass open. We're starting to see like weird price upticks for these cards because normally at release it plays out like the same way, set after set, time after time, release after release, where pre-order prices are going to be extremely strong for you until eventually that initial dump happens. And then when that initial dump happens, you're still going to have your highest prices till eventually the more and more of those cards hit the market, the lower and lower that price is going to hit until eventually, given some point, it's going to hit its floor. And usually that floor happens during the like most mass opening of that product, where we're kind of seeing a little bit of a difference in that. Like, we're starting to see it while supply isn't really there, people are still buying these cards up when these cards should be opened at the highest point they're being opened. We're starting to see these weird price upticks, and Mason did a great job of showcasing that in his video. But it is a little fascinating to watch, you know, and that's just one set. That is just really little like anecdotal evidence, but it's the same thing with Obsidian Flames. It was the same thing with Paldea Evolved. It's just quality control was just lackluster. And, you know, to be honest with you, when you think about it, Sword and Shield was every card out of Sword and Shield perfect? No, of course not. But when you go back and you look at these 10 rates and you say, well, what is like the chase of Sword and Shield? What is the easiest card to pinpoint? Well, it's the Moonbryon. And you look at the Moonbryon and you go, well, that card damn near is close to an 80% gem mint 10 rate. And you go, okay. Or you look at like, you know, some of the Japanese promos like Scarlet and Violet 001. While that is Scarlet and Violet, it still is Japanese print quality, and you look at a card like that and it's closer to 90% 10 rates. You look at some of these Chinese cards coming out recently, and the 10 rates for Chinese cards are pushing greater than 80%, and you're saying, okay, well, like, other languages are not quite having this quality control issue. And we'll get into Japanese too, and 151 for Japanese. For the first time in a very, very long time, we really start to see the Japanese print quality really go down the shitter really fast, and I think a little bit faster than a lot of people were expecting, and not just faster than people were expecting, just so out of the norm for Japanese print quality that, to be honest with you, those people that were even doing that play, some of them are kind of, I feel, a little shocked by that. And I think especially 151 is probably one of the best examples of that, for Japanese print quality going downhill. Now, there's a lot of speculation of why that's happening. I think personally, I think a huge implication or reason that's happening is one, demand for Japanese product is continuing to go crazy. Japan's trying their best to like make a bunch of rules saying, okay, anybody that this product, it says it right on the box, made in Japan for sale in Japan only. They've been cracking down on all these like LGSs shipping overseas, saying if you're shipping overseas, you're cutting your allocations. You're no longer getting this product. They were trying to do a lot of print to demand stuff. Even the print to demand stuff was not enough. You can see what I mean, they're doing massive reprints. Something again, Japanese products never used to get reprints. You know, you look at like V-Star Universe, that got major reprints. Even EV Heroes got major reprints. Those boxes got knocked down. VMAX Climax, perfect example. Look at VMAX Climax. The crazy prices VMAX were selling for. The crazy prices VMAX Climax dropped till eventually look at what VMAX Climax is selling at today. The only reason I say that is because I got VMAX Climax on my brain because I'm shipping out rusty sealed case of VMAX Climax 20 booster boxes. I was so amazed at how much that case was because I was so removed from the price of those VMAX Climax boxes. I had no clue the sealed case premium and how much those have ticked up to. But, you know, you look at all that stuff too and you say, well, all these reprints were happening and stuff. So Japan's got these printers on absolute burr mode, but the big thing that not a lot of people are talking about, I'm definitely talking about it, people that watch this channel are definitely talking about, is there's a huge demand for cards right now coming out of China, especially mainland China. You know, there was always, you know, like the Taiwan and Singapore always had their own Chinese cards, but that's not what I'm talking about. The demand from what I'm hearing going on in China right now is crazy. I've heard like stories of people waiting 9 hours outside of a store in order just to pick up like some of these collection boxes. So then all those Chinese cards are getting printed in Japan. So Japan's printers are getting pulled in two hard directions. And it's not just like it's only the Chinese cards get printed in Japan. It's not only these Japanese cards. So you got like a ton of demand from a market that Pokemon has got to be paying attention to. Because if you're Pokemon and your goal in a way is to make money, whether people want to admit that or not, Pokemon's overall goal is to make money. And when the biggest possible market in the world, which is mainland China, and however many billion plus people they have, even if you can just get a small fraction of a percentage of those people to get into Pokemon cards, like the market for a product like that is astronomical. It could easily surpass anything the Japanese market's doing. Easily could surpass anything the English market is doing just by the sheer volume of people there and the potential that exists for a hobby like that in mainland China. So those printers are being pulled hard in both directions. Now, I think Pokemon wants to produce more cards for them, but they just can't because they're focusing on the Japanese product. And we've seen so many press releases from Pokemon in the last 2-3 years of just more or less apologetic responses from Pokemon saying, listen, everyone, we understand that demand's at an all-time high. We are printing to max capabilities. We're going to go back and we're going to reprint stuff. But the problem is you can only go back. You can only reprint so much. You can only do so much. Because at the end of the day, one of the things I like to talk about more than anything else on this channel is what Pokemon, at the most truest chorus of what Pokemon is, they are a freight train moving down the absolute track, and they are not stopping for anybody. So even though they're trying to go back and like quench all the demand for these older sets, you still got all these new sets still coming out, you know. So they still have to allot all these printers to just print the newest set. You know, you come out with a set like 151, you look at all the demand that exists for 151, and then you look at like a V-Star Universe or VMAX Climax or EV Heroes, like those more recent sets, and you go, there's so much demand for 151. We can never go back really and reprint these. And if we do go back and reprint them, we can't just only reprint these and never reprint anything else. Like, so the problem is they're going back and they're doing what they can, but what they can do is just not enough. And I think that is just the problem we're running into too in this hobby, is what they're doing is just not enough. The demand is just too strong. And the problem is when you come out with a set like a 151, which I'm going to be honest with you, 151 There's no PokeTuber out there. There's no investment person. There's no collector person out there who slept on 151. We all knew it wasn't a matter of like, will 151 be a great product? It was just 151 will be a great product. We started talking about 151 on this channel before we knew a single card that was in the set. We were talking about it strictly just by the name because it was in the name. 151. 151. Those original 151 Pokemon, and we didn't even see a single card in the set, and the conversations already started to take place. Is 151 potentially the greatest set Pokemon has ever printed? Think about like how illogical that statement is. We hadn't seen a single card in that set, and people were already starting to have the debate and the conversation of can 151 be the greatest set? And yes, is it a meme? Is it a joke that every set is always the greatest? The next set is always the greatest set Pokemon has ever produced? Of course. It's that big joke. The next set is always always the next best set. But 151's like had all the makings of it. And we're seeing the demand. Try going into your local stores and a lot of people speculated that come late 20 we're getting close to 2024. So come late 2023, you shouldn't be still able to go into your Walmarts or your Target or your GameStop, those really big box retailers. You shouldn't be going in there and then them not having product on the shelf. Like, while they might have some of the poor performing products, there might be some Stadium Flames sitting on the shelves, maybe some like Scarlet and Violet base or something sitting on the shelves. But the in-demand products, that 151, for the most part, it's been really hard for a lot of people to pick up these products, and especially, and when I talk about 151, and there's even a subset within 151, which is that high demand product, those booster bundles. We're seeing like really weird price switches between like ETBs and booster bundles, and then you looked at what happened with PokemonCenter.com. PokemonCenter.com ETBs are still selling out. They're still selling for a premium. There's still a ton of demand. You got all these pack openers, like there was a while, just like I talked about how all these people that were killing it on whatnot on the early days, and then all this demand started coming, while the demand was still growing on whatnot, like the actual amount of sellers on that platform was increasing exponentially. The thing is whatnot is experiencing like a heyday again because so many people want to rip 151. All the YouTube pack rippers and stuff, anybody that you might be following, they're opening 151 like it's going out of style because they get that product again. They got that product that people want. How is 151 going to play out in the long term and the near term? It's going to probably play out as, like we say, the meme. Is it going to be the best set? No. The next set is always the best set. But is it going to be one of the best sets? Yes. It's the same. And what are people comparing it to? This is a problem too we run into. It's like, what are you comparing 151 to? Do you compare it to Celebrations? Do you compare it to Shining Fates? No, probably not. But do you compare it to Hidden Fates? And the answer is like maybe yes. So you're already comparing 151 to some of the greatest sets that Pokemon has ever made. And, but it goes back to that fear and that uncertainty. Even though I just, like, laid out a scenario for 151, like a roadmap for 151 and being one of the greatest sets, I just talked about all the demand that went there. People still look at it and they say, but will it be as good as 2020, 2021? And I think that's the problem. People keep going back to that same thing. And I think it goes to the title of this video is, where is the fear in this hobby, really? I think it's just, even when things are good, like, if you don't think what 151 is doing right now is good, you have very poor perspective for the history of this hobby. I'm telling you right now, 151 is performing as good, if not better, or as just exactly the way a lot of people more or less was planning 151 to play out. It's textbook. It is great. But I think the problem is people keep going back to that because this is a problem we're going to run into too, where in the history of this hobby, products should not sell instantly off the shelves. Like, you should be, in theory, at least in the history of this hobby, should be able to go into your local big box retail and be able to pick up the last 5 or 6 sets. I know for some people out there, to hear words like that, 5 or 6 sets, they go, 6 sets, that's a lot of sets. But, historically in this hobby, you can go into any store and yes, source 6 different sets. The problem is a lot of people that got back in recently and they only came out of like the booms and booms and the craziness which was Pokemon. They say, well, I never seen multiple sets on the shelves. This has to be indicative of just a downturn in the hobby, because there was always, okay, Pokemon released a new set. That one set instantly sold out until eventually, like, there was a couple restocks of certain products till eventually whatever the new set was coming out, that set was totally stocked on the shelves, and you never even got to go back sometimes as far as 1 to 2 sets. And I just think because that timeline is now starting to change a little bit for people, I think people's perspectives are just not maybe changing enough. So it goes back to that fear factor and goes back to that title of this video, is people are just going back and they're saying, well, maybe it's good today, but maybe it's not as good as 2020, not as good as 2020. And those 2 years are never going to be repeatable. I honestly believe that is where most people's fear truly lies. And the reason why it lies there is what I mentioned earlier. It's because when people are so financially vested in this and they have so much money riding on this, they go, well, what if my money's stagnant? What if my money doesn't do anything? What if I don't see these crazy gains? Because again, they're going to keep going back to, we're not in that 2020, we're not in that 2021 hype. So it's just this big like cycle of fear people are going through. But this is the problem too with this hobby too. And I think this is going to be like one of the toughest conversations to kind of explain to people. And like when you really boil this hobby down to like the most bare of this hobby, everything goes in cycles. And all you have to be able to do in this hobby to be successful is you just have to be fluid and be able to traverse this hobby and whatever the demand is at the time. I'm telling you, if the demand is in graded cards, which we saw that in 2020, 2021, demand was definitely in graded cards. Where maybe now demand has shifted a little bit to raw cards, you need to be able to be fluid with this hobby and shift to where like the demand is. It's the same thing where maybe if demand shifts out of booster boxes, move out of booster boxes into something else. When demand, like a perfect example would be ETBs. ETBs, look at what happened. ETBs were released, beautiful Lugia artwork from Plasma Storm. So you got Plasma Storm, Plasma Freeze, Plasma Blast ETBs. Everybody lost their mind. They go, look at how rare ETBs are. ETBs never get reprinted. Nobody ever goes back and reprints ETBs. And that was true for a long period of the hobby until eventually, we saw crazy price increases for Sword and Shield base ETBs, Rebel Trash ETBs, Darkness Ablaze, Vivid Voltage. What happened? Pokemon eventually went back, started to reprint Sword and Shield base ETBs. Sword and Shield base ETBs got 2 different reprints. We really knew those because they were very distinct different waves. One of them had Pokeball wrap on them. One of them didn't. That was the first time we really saw massive reprints of ETBs till eventually we had like weird ETB reprints of Sun and Moon base. And you look at Sun and Moon base ETBs still to this moment today, how low those ETBs are in relative to the rest of Sun and Moon just because they got reprints. But then you look at what happened with Darkness Ablaze. Darkness Ablaze ETBs went up to like 123. Vivid Voltage ETBs went up to like the 140 price range. Both those got reprints. And then what happened is the market lost a lot of their confidence in a product like that. Well, guess what? That's just part of being fluid in this hobby. It's like, okay, well, in the past, yes, ETBs were, these great collection buys. Nobody really, did these buys. But now the hobby has moved. You got to be fluid. Well, why you got to be fluid? Because they're reprinting these things until eventually, like Pokemon Center ETBs, which I'm very happy. Pretty much every single community post I've made, with the exception of a handful of them, every community post I ever made on this channel was pretty much just me putting up community posts. Anytime PokemonCenter.com ETBs went up, and I'm happy because I was always on the Pokemon Center ETB hype train. Like, I always thought those were good buys, and luckily those have played out, but it's just being liquid, So just because some ETBs may not be investable because Pokemon's reprinting, but other ones are. But now, this is the thing too. The same way as I just said that, like, there can come a time in the future where ETBs sit on the shelves. Pokemon doesn't reprint ETBs again until eventually in the future, just like ETBs used to be collectible, used to be super investable because they didn't get reprinted. Maybe that timeline happens again right like into the future. Now, I think we're too soon for that. I think there could potentially be reprints for these, but it's just part of staying fluid with this hobby. It's like understanding the nuances. Okay, these certain products seem to be getting reprinted until eventually they stop. And then when they stop getting reprinted, that's probably a good indicator to get back in. But this is a problem. I think people would just you really like kind of just dig your feet into the ground and you say, well, I'm only going to compare to these. And it's like, well, part of being successful is just the poor performing lackluster products, get out of those or don't buy those. Try to find areas in the market that you think are going to be underprinted, or maybe undervalued, or maybe underutilized. Like, that is the hardest thing to do. You know, you look at a lot of modern products right now, there are really, really great buying opportunities now for a lot of modern products, you know, especially when you look at booster box cases. You know, Scarlet and Violet base, Paldea Evolve, Sitting Flames. I know I keep going back to these, but they are the most modern sets. When you look at what these booster box cases are selling for, you know, they're great buying opportunities. But I'm not doing this right now. I'm not acquiring positions in these products because, to be honest with you, I just feel, and this is where like maybe I'm going to be shown wrong in the future. I just think that my money is, you know, better off in other places. And I think the problem is just because I'm worried of one, that supply was just too strong, meaning the supply well outpaced demand. And especially the fact that these sets, while they're not inherently bad sets, I think they're all good sets. I just think they didn't have the pop to them that maybe a lot of people came to know, especially when I say they've came to know like these great sets, it's because they came out of that end of the Sword and Shield block. And when you look at the end of the Sword and Shield block, starting, you know, you could go all the way back to starting to, you know, battle styles, introducing these character rare cards, and then all the way up until you get to Silver Tempest, and it's like every set in between, it just seemed to get a little bit better, a little bit better, a little bit better, until eventually you hit Evolving Skies, which had all these great like alt-art cards. But then when you hit Brilliant Stars, it's like, okay, maybe you don't have all these great alt-art cards anymore, but look at all the character rare cards. So then you just got spoiled with all these character rare cards and all these alt cards, and then that later half of Sword and Shield was just so like stacked. So eventually when we moved into what became the Scarlet and Violet block, it's just like, okay, well, what's next, Pokemon? I think that was just the fear people were having. So the reason why I'm staying out of a product like that is I just think my money's better off other places, and I don't know what reprints is going to look like. Now, that is a product I'm fine with just kind of sitting on for a little while and just waiting to see where the market goes. And if the market does actually start to uptick, I'm going to be honest with you. Like a lot of these Scarlet and Violet booster boxes, I'm fine with not picking these up at the bottom. I think we could be at the bottom for some of these, you know, assuming that we don't get reprints of these. So I'm fine with not picking up the bottom. And the problem is I might lose out on 20%. And the problem is in this hobby, and something I've really reiterated on so many different videos in the past, is 20% is a lot. But in this hobby, we are so spoiled that 20% doesn't seem like a lot, because it just feels like, yeah, maybe if you make 20% in a year or two, that's still great on paper, but well, what could you have done by rinsing and repeating that money in other spots of the hobby? What if you were trying to focus on things that maybe you thought were undervalued? And this is where like a lot of speculation comes in. That a lot of, and this takes a lot of work too, like to be able to identify this market, to stick with this market. You know, one of the products I talked about as recently as, was it my last live or the live before, is I talked about the Pokemon TCG Classic, and talked about how I'm planning to navigate a product like that. That is a product that puts my mind in a pretzel. I don't really know who it's made for. I just know the way I'm going to interact with that product. I'm going to get that product. I'm going to cannibalize it down. I'm going to take the cards out of the set. I'm going to grade them. And I think there is going to be premiums for a lot of these cards, especially first to market when you're talking big three, Charizard, Venusaur, Blastoise, and then you have, you know, all your evolutions line, whether it's Bulbasaur, Charmander, Squirtle, or War Turtle, Ivysaur, Charmeleon, all those cards are still base set reprints, but you get two of each of those and you still get them in a holo, and then you get that cool Mr. Mime artwork. That's something we never saw because it was only ever in vending series. And then you also have, I don't really care about like the EX Lugia Ho-Ho, and I don't care about those, but I do care about like the Chansey reprint. I do care about some of these, like the Mewtwo reprint. They're all going to be in holos. They're going to be base set reprints. I feel like those cards, like just grading those at $15 a piece, or depending if I want to do first to market, and then I have to start looking at the value tiers and saying, well, at what tier does this card, in my opinion, make the most sense? What kind of condition are these cards? Are these things fresh out of the packs? Are they going to be PSA 9s? Are they all going to be PSA 10 contenders? Because then at that point, then I'm really looking at the value tiers. I'm trying to push these babies out to market, be first to market, until eventually, if those cards do really good, I guess what, I'm going to take all that profit and I'm just going to buy up a ship more of these Pokemon TCG Classics, and then I'm going to get my price points down until eventually I'm going to rinse and repeat that until eventually I make it to whatever the bottom of those cards end up being. And the bottom of those cards for some of those Bulbasaurs, Charmeleons, and stuff, like, they could be $15 plus 15. I mean, you could be when the play is all said and done, that's a $35 card in a PSA 10. I think it will take a little bit of time to get there, but I'm already like trying to think of my whole cycle through that product. First to play, I just told you I might be selling some of these babies at value tier. The value tier might cost me more than $35 per card just to grade that card, until eventually at the end of the life cycle I can see that card, if there's a ton of supply, being potentially $35. But then I look at a product like that and I say, well, what happens if a lot of people don't like grade these? What if this play is not optimized like this? Because now, guess what? Where some of these Nagaba Pikachus and Eevees, they have low price points, so there's a ton of demand, there's a ton of competition there because of that price point. Or I look at something like the SV001 promo and it's like, oh, that was a $20 card. Or you look at the Chinese promo and that's a $2.99 seal promo. Or you look at something like the on the ball Pikachus when those were first being released from game, and they were $20 if you were picking them up in bulk, hopefully from a buyer. Or you look at an old maid card until eventually, like, how much supply of those cards exist, until I look at all these plays and it's like, well, the thing about all those plays, the one thing that they have in common more than anything else, is low entry points. And I feel like people, they just pile on to these low entry point plays. But then I say, well, what was a play for me that worked out really well for me and maybe had a little bit of a barrier of entry to it? And a card that had maybe a little bit of a barrier of entry was something as simple as a Japanese stamp box promos with the Pikachu and Cranberry. I know I'm touching base on a lot of topics I talked about in the last video, but it's important to talk through like the mindset and like, how are you going to navigate? How are you going to stay liquid in this hobby that seems to just constantly be moving? And it's saying, well, what happened? Why were the stamp box promos potentially like not as ultimately utilized by people? Why wasn't it as crazy of a race to bottom? Why did we start to see some of these prices start to uptick? Why didn't we just see like this absolute race to the bottom? Why are Japanese stamp box promos, Pikachu and Cranberry, why are they not $50 cards? Why did we see those prices go up? Well, barrier of entry. And that barrier of entry is as simple as price point. So when you have something as simple as price point, when you have somebody picking up stamp boxes at $250, $240, $200 when they're at their low, it's, well, that's a $200 product. I'm not going to buy 100 of these. Where I could buy 20 $20 cards, you can't really do that with a stamp box. So what happens is people bought one, they put it in their personal collection. Maybe they bought two, so at 200 or 250, let's say it was 250, they bought two of them, that brings them up to 500. And they're like, guess what? I bought two copies. I did one set where I'm going to grade it myself because I want to do the play. And guess what? That other stamp box, maybe I'll sell it and I'll grade those. So they didn't have a lot. It was impossible for them to flood that market. They just didn't do it because there just wasn't the capital there. So there was like this little bit of barrier of entry. And because that race to the bottom maybe never happened, the market had a little bit longer of a time to kind of just like weed itself out. The early cards to market, yes, it pulled down the market a little bit until eventually when those plays start to dry up and you have a lot of people, they're like, Well, I'm still a collector at heart. I still need one set in my personal collection. That is why I need to at least have one. They're just the cards, they just didn't exist. And then again, barrier of entry. Barrier of entry is so vital in this hobby, and that barrier of entry for a product like that is as simple as you couldn't go into your local Walmart or your Target or your GameStop. You just could not buy that stamp box promo off the shelves. Your only barrier of entry was you'd have to log into your eBay account and do something as simple as clicking buy it now on eBay. And that might sound so simple to a lot of people. That very, very super easy like entry point of just doing buy it now and sourcing it directly from Japan. But you would be amazed at how many people that one simple barrier just pushes them away because they only ever want to buy from English sellers. They don't want to buy from Japanese sellers. They don't want to do this stuff. It's just, and, but now this is the danger of a product like the TCG Classic. That barrier of entry doesn't exist. You can still go on PokemonCenter.com and you can still buy. You can still go on GameStop. You can still go on some of these big online sellers and you can get it for deals, you know. While on PokemonCenter.com, it's $3.99. At GameStop, if you're a pro member, you got $20 off. It was only $3.79. And then now I'm starting to see Pokemon TCG drops. I think it was like TCG, one of them, Player Stadium. I don't know. Just had them listed today for $3.59. So it's, you know, there's less barrier of entry for a product like that because people are more a lot of people out there are just comfortable buying from PokemonCenter.com. And if you did not think that was true, if people weren't comfortable, I promise you, if people were not super comfortable buying from PokemonCenter.com because it's such an easy barrier of entry, the same thing like a TCG player. TCG player is such an easy barrier of entry. That's why you can have PokemonCenter.com selling booster boxes for $143.99 when you could go on eBay and buy that same booster box for $105. But yet, PokemonCenter.com, day after day, hour after hour, like, are just going to have a ton of sales for that booster box because the barrier of entry is just that much easier. And the same thing with TCG Player. TCG Player is infamous for having their booster boxes be absolutely like crazy prices in comparison. Like TCG Player could be like $180, PokemonCenter.com could be $143, and eBay could be $125. And yet TCG Player, for whatever reason, that $180 price point will still sell. And I don't know why it will sell. I'll never understand that, but it's just people, it's just that easiest barrier of entry for people. They get familiar with stuff. And when you have this, all this stuff compound, this is what the problem is you're going to have to start to look at every single play. You're going to have to break it down to the most core fundamentals. And this is the problem. The same way as the TCG Classic, I'm already looking at the end of that product. How am I going to interact with that hobby from day 1 to day 600? What am I doing at day 600 with a product like that? What am I going to be doing with a product like that at day 1? But to bring it back to the title of this video is, I think people just see like what is now maybe a little bit more involved for this hobby and they go, nothing was this hard in 2020. Nothing was this difficult in 2021. Like, it didn't take any work, and it was, the problem is a lot of people were super spoiled. But it's the same way. The people were there before it started are, and we're still there in the middle, and we'll still be there at the end. And when we were at Charlotte Collecticon, we made this joke. We said, you know what, in the future, if slabs ever get down to $2 a piece, and you can bulk buy those slabs for 50 cents a piece, and you can still make $1.50 per slab, well, guess what? That will just be maybe where the market moves on certain slabs in the future. Now, I don't, sure, the conversation of the dollar bulk slab bin always gets brought up, but I mean that. But I will still be flipping cards and doing this play if I'm sourcing cards for 50 cents and still selling them for $2. There's still a ton of margins there. It's just the problem is when those price points for a lot of people get lower, maybe the competition is just that much tougher. And obviously don't take this one line out of context and start running with it and say PK thinks all slabs are going to be 50 cents and you're going to be selling. No, don't take that. I'm just trying to use it as an example. So be careful taking my words out of context there. But it's how are you going to interact with the hobby? And I think the problem is too is, I've been talking to people too, and a lot of the people I've been talking to too is they have raised this concern to me, is that the plays they were doing, especially the graded plays they were doing, like either one of two things were happening. One, they were getting maybe super lucky, for a while, like sourcing cards raw, they were grading really well. And I think, maybe that's a possibility. And then the number two is maybe they just sometimes get a little bit greedy. You keep pushing that envelope, pushing that envelope, pushing that envelope. And I think that is the fear, and that is one of the dangers for a lot of people. And this is what the title of this video is: the fear. It's okay, you push the envelope so many times until eventually you keep pushing it, pushing it, pushing it until eventually whatever like imaginary barrier that exists there, until eventually you hit that barrier and you just can't push past it until all so you kind of were building a house of cards behind you until you hit that barrier, and it kind of just bumps you right back into the house of cards. And next thing you know, all the stuff you worked for, all the like minutes and hours, and at this point years and years, and however much time you've put into this hobby. And like I've said, the number one most valuable resource in this hobby is by far not money. The most valuable resource in this hobby is easily your time. So if all the time you put into this hobby just in a way feels wasted, like that can be a huge fear for people, that their most valuable resource was squandered. And maybe that ride up was great, but the ride down can be 3 times faster than the ride up. Maybe it took you 3 years to get there. The ride down could potentially be a year. And I think that is just the fear people are looking at. Okay. Anyways, typical PK rant. I don't know if I took a breath for 56 minutes. Anybody that stuck through that, appreciate you guys. Do me one favor. Hit that like button. I am going to read the comments right now. I want to interact with some of the chat and see what you guys are typing. I don't know why I can only go up so high. I think there's something wrong with it. Yeah. Anyways, for whatever reason, the highest up I could go is I see Chef954. So Chef954, I think he's got his own Instagram page now. He's going to actually get his face out there, so that would be pretty cool. Let's see. Felipe de Sosa, PA Pokemon polls. He says, I have those. Oh my God, I'm at the stamp promo part of my chat. What? Listen, I'm telling you, I'm looking at my screen. I can only scroll up so high. Says he freaking loves them. A lot of people love them. It's simple. Like, beautiful cards with fan favorite Pokemon do really well. E4 says, it's your video, PK. Rant about what you want, man. I'll still be here. The support a great guy like you. I appreciate you. West G said, my dude's still on a roll. I definitely didn't go far enough up. Frestat says, PK rant, and it means my boy's back. Let me see if I could go back to, I want to try to go on to my actual channel and see if I could pick up the live there. And go scroll all the way up on the chat. Let's see. I don't even know. Okay. Okay. I think I might. Oh, nope. That's weird. I can only scroll back so far. This stinks. But Chef954 says PK crushes these live streams. Snick Post says Walmarts around him have 0 151 and 0 Disney Lorcana. LGSs have pre-orders for the next Lorcana set called Floodborn, and yet they don't even have stock of the first chapter yet. So I listen, I'm not an expert at Lorcana. I don't pretend to be. A lot of the information I'm getting, in fact, not a lot, all the information I'm getting from Disney Lorcana is all secondhand, so take it for a grain of salt for what it is. But, I mean, Disney Lorcana did seem like they were very, very apparent to a lot of people that Disney Lorcana was not going to be an underproduced set, that they were just going to print it into absolute oblivion. You can talk to Gem Mint Pokemon. When Gem Mint Pokemon was at the Nationals in Chicago, they went up to the Disney Lorcana booth, and they were kind of trying to pick the Disney Lorcana people's brains, like kind of trying to figure out like what the odds were, pulling some of these cards, what the chase of some of these cards were, because, they were thinking of, okay, like there's going to be a financial aspect to Disney Lorcana. People are going to want to get these, and from what they were saying, the people behind the booth who were answering these questions were kind of, in a way, maybe not being disrespectful, laughing in their face, but definitely giving them like a strong, yeah, this is not going to be rare. None of this is going to be rare. That was the way they were projecting themselves to these people, and it seems like Disney Lorcana has been anything kind of but that, meaning it has been really scarce. And we saw like what happened with Disney Lorcana at that very early release. It A lot of people started to raise the red flags. A lot of people, especially LGSs, they were asked for decent amount of these. I shout out to Mason. I know I mentioned Mason's name earlier. I think he asked for 200 booster boxes. They ended up only allotting them 6 booster boxes till eventually, like some of these distributors ended up cutting anyone that didn't have organized play. So they were only sending Disney Lorcana to game stores that actually, in fact, did have organized play. So these were all huge red flags that, okay, maybe supply's not going to be super strong for a product like this. And then we saw some of it start to trickle out, but yeah, and I get it. It's whatever. Ravenberger, they're not even really a trading card game printing company. They're more known for like board games and stuff like this. So that was a big red flag too. It's like, do these people have the capability to keep up with the demand? And it does not seem like that is going to happen. And especially the fact that they are now moving on to the next set, and they're clearly not like dealing with the secondary market of Disney Lorcana in the first place. It's weird. I don't really understand. Tom B says, I only bought one stamp box. I wish I got a few more, but it was a while ago. Yeah, I mean, now looking back on stamp boxes seems like a long time ago, but it was something when I was still recording in my living room with the photo of the Rockefeller Center behind me, I was talking about stamp box promo. I mentioned those. I don't even know how many times I mentioned stamp box promo when I was actively doing the play. And the thing is maybe that product, even when I was mentioning it, yes, I had a smaller channel then, but I was still getting decent amount of views and stuff. Maybe people looked at a product like that and said, well, PK recommended this at 200 or 240. It's still a little bit too expensive, and maybe that price point is just such a deterrent for a lot of people. Now, price points in this hobby will change. I think a lot of price point, like the way price points maybe determine people a little bit too, and I think this is has some merit to it, and it's important to mention, is I think people get so, I don't know, so just overly bearish on this hobby, or they just become so risk averse in this hobby that bigger price points just in a way don't matter to people too. So there can be this just normal natural progressions where things just are naturally going to become more and more money, and people are just going to kind of care less and less. They'll just be more accepting of it. And I mentioned it in my last video, this hobby's so big that we still do have $3.99 packs. So it's not like a product like Pokemon TCG Classic like bullies out people. It doesn't bully out anyone. It's just a product that exists. And to be honest with you, like little Timmy or whatever, like 7-year old, which I used to be 7-year old me buying cards in '99 or whatever. Like those people, they don't even know that product exists. Probably the same way as a lot of you guys when you were collecting base set Jungle Fossil. You didn't know that base set first edition probably even existed. You didn't know that base set Shadowless even existed. You didn't care. You're just so excited about opening that new set, and you just want to open those cards. So it's not really affecting those people the same way as base set first edition or base set or Shadowless never affected you as a kid, because you're just gonna care less. I think we are just interacting with this hobby a little bit different than other people are. That's all. PA Pokemon says, I wish I bought the Eevee Heroes gym boxes at 300. Yeah, I remember. So when those boxes came out, and then they ended up having the Espeon in it, and the Espeon sitting on the roof, and then we ended up getting that card in English, ended up getting pushed out in Fusion Strike, and the question was like, well, why didn't this card just come in Evolutions? It's obviously this card fits perfect with this set, and we didn't get it till later in Fusion Strike, but even that card became a set. But yeah, those Eevee boxes, I mean, the writing was kind of on the wall for products like those two. Like they, that was the thing too. Those products were never cheap. They never really like had super low buying points. So just the fact, like he brings, I'm PA Pokemon Pulse, great comment. So what he's saying by that is that price point probably just scared a lot of people away because of that barrier of entry, $300. And I'm sure everybody's looking at those now and saying, man, I wish I bought some of those Espeon boxes for $300. Like, they look at it and they go, yeah, but at the time, the barrier of entry at a $300 product, I wasn't going to go in and buy 20 of them. But I will buy 20 SV001 promos, because barrier of entry, barrier of entry, barrier of entry. Like, don't sleep on how like important barrier of entry is to people, and how in a way sort of debilitating barrier of entry can be to people. So yeah, even though it was a box for 300, a lot of people looked at that and said, "I'm not going to spend $300 on a product. Why don't I just buy the whole booster box of this for 80 or whatever EV Heroes was selling at for a while." Fresh Tat says, "Peak." Oh, I guess I was really on. I was on some sort of soapbox tonight. PK rants were coming in hot. Uh, let's see. Mick Nick said, "The longer the rant, the more devastating the accidental scroll to the bottom of the chat." Yeah, nailed it, Mick Nick. I definitely destroyed myself by losing the entire first half of this chat. Uh, uh, let's see. Chef said, "I'm here for the whole rant." People are just saying, "Let him cook." Oh, sorry, guys. I was ranting. Fresh Tat says, "Rant so long seems pre-recorded." Uh, that would be great if I should just do that now. Like, just start ranting and then just like, "Oh, sorry, I don't have time for the chat, guys." Uh, uh, let's see. PA Pokemon Poll says, "Gonna have a ton of people going for the Van Gogh promos." Yeah. So, I've only seen the one Van Gogh promo, like the flower one. But, like with the Sunflora, like that promo. And the promo everybody's talking about is like, what is Vincent Van Gogh known for? If you had to say, above all things, it's Starry Night. And what is the one modern Pokemon card that is the craziest hyped modern Pokemon card? That is the Moonbreon. If you could just combine those two things, if you could have a Moonbreon Starry Night card, I don't know how much that card would be worth, how much that card would be selling for, but that would be, and I mean this, that would be one of those cards where I would honestly try to liquidate every available asset I have, and I would pile into that card. And I don't even care what the price point of a card like that is. If the price point of that card was $300, $400 raw at release, I would try to just do whatever I could to pile into that card. You think people look back on like the Scream promos, and yeah, I mean, obviously, like the Mimikyu one was a little bit tougher to get. Maybe the Pikachu one was a little bit tougher to get. But even like what the easier ones, like the Psyduck, are doing, you look. I mean, it's artwork. It's Scream promos. It's got fan favorite Pokemon. If you have this is. I don't give any financial advice. This is the closest I'm ever gonna. I will not. This is not financial advice. This is the closest I'll ever get. I would I would pile into a card like that. I don't know how that card performs poorly in the future. I will tell you right. And again, this is not a card that exists, to my understanding. I just told you I only know about like the Sunflora card. If the Moonbreon with Starry Night background exists, being a limited release for only the Van Gogh Museum, if that card does end up being real, pile into it. Just pile. Just pile in, pile in, pile in. Like, do whatever it takes to get. I mean, that's what I'll be doing. My background might be empty. It might just I'll just put like soon to be replaced, because I've just liquidated everything. That will be one of those promos, a Starry Night Moonbreon card. If that card can't perform well, then guess what? I just don't want to be in the hobby at that point. Like, that will be the card. That will be the greatest promo card ever. However many of those cards, and then this is the best part. If that card was limited, meaning very hard to get, huge barrier of entry, huge price points right at release, $200-$300 right at release, huge barrier of entry, so people are just not able to bury into that card, and then this would be so hard to do. But if you could corner that market, that would be big. That would be like, I mean, I would do like huge numbers. But now this is the thing. Remember how I mentioned earlier in this video where if something like that happens, you take these bigger risks? I just told you, like, the title of this video is where Where is the fear in Pokemon coming from? And I just told you that if a certain card was released that I don't even know if it existed, I would just pile into that thing with all certainty, and that's this dangerous. I mean, at least be self-aware. I try to be self-aware to understand what danger is. That is being as self-aware as you possibly can. I see the danger in a play like that. The danger will be very, very apparent, and I'll just get. But I'll bury it. I'll just. Okay, so that's my thoughts on the Vince Van Gogh promos. Financial, financial ruin. Uh, let's see. Let's see. PA Pokemon Poll says Pokemon Center is less of a risk. People are afraid of being scammed. True, but I feel like at this point, this late in the game, like there are so many reputable sellers out there now that you're, as long as you're not buying from the absolute sketchiest of sketchy, meaning you're buying from the guy selling Evolution's booster boxes shipped from China for $79.99, even though those are $700-800 booster boxes. If you're still want to like get your good deal and you bought an Evolution's booster box on eBay for $79.95 and you don't understand why you're a scam, like if you keep doing those plays, then yeah, I can see why you only want to buy from PokemonCenter.com. But at this point, there's so many reputable sellers out there, whether it's through eBay or different websites and stuff. Like people shouldn't be afraid of that anymore. Jumbo Fit says, been watching so long, the like button refreshed. Listen, I got 120 people watching this live right now. Do me a favor, if you guys could go down below, hit that like button. It means a lot. If you appreciate the rants, if you appreciate the time I donate to the channel, just because I like to do this. If you do appreciate it, the only thing I ever ask for is just hit that little like button. And it just shows me that you guys appreciate the work I put in. And that means the world. I don't ask for anything. All I ask is you hit the like button, and if for whatever reason you're not subscribed, if you hit that subscribe button, it helps out a lot too. Let's see. We got Legend of Luke in here. Good to see you, Luke. Relk says, nothing is hard in this hobby, just have to pay attention. A lot of it's just, yeah, paying attention, being available. Let's see. So, Snickpo says, I've only bought singles off eBay or TCG Player, never sealed. I think it's a lack of trust for seller tampering with sealed product. Again, it depends on the seller. There's not a lot of I mean, if your sellers move in tons of product, they're probably not tampering with anything. All right. I jumped all the way to the bottom, but I think I'm still good. Let's see. So Chef954 said 50-cent slabs is already trending. Yeah. Son of a Merc says, PK, your ability to just go off the dome about Pokemon is unmatched, just saying. Yeah. I will tell you, it takes... I was... So, a little bit of like a joke. I was talking to Rattle and all the Rattle Discord guys when I was down at Charlotte Collecticon. I was like, the joke is when I'm talking to the camera, so you get the image of my face, the background, whatever. Maybe you're listening to this at work and you got it. I said, if I ever just move my camera so it just has a different point of view, so the camera's showing me at an angle, all it is would just be me sitting in a chair for an hour and a half just screaming at a wall. Like, that's all it would be if I just had a little bit different of a camera angle. So I was saying that we were making the joke when we were at Charlotte Collecticon. They're like, PK, you got to just do it one day. Like, just put the camera off to the side and just pretend like you don't know that it's recording you from the side. And just, like, give them that different angle. Like, give them screaming at the wall type stuff. Let's see. Relk says he has a timeshare in Orlando, so card party will be easy for him. Only a 2-hour drive. He can drive. I cannot drive to Hawaii, though. I would love to do Hawaii. I got a couple of things I want to do. I probably won't end up doing any of them. Definitely won't be able to do all three. I want to do Worlds in Hawaii. That's going to be rough with the wife and kids. I want to bring the wife and kids with me. Hawaii is like one of those trips. It's gonna be tough. I'm gonna tell you, be real tough. Explain to my wife that I'm gonna go on vacation to Hawaii and she can't come with me. But I could bring her, bring the kids next year. Like my second born's only gonna be 4 months and a couple days. So by that point, he's gonna be whatever, a year old. My oldest is gonna be 3. Do I want to do an 18-hour plane ride to Hawaii with a 1 year old and a 3 year old sitting on either my lap or my wife's lap? And the answer is probably no to that. And then again, Florida. I mean, if Pat Flynn extends the invite, I definitely do a card party. And then Collecticon Orlando, I want to do that one too. It's tough though. It's tough. I'm telling you, being away from your wife and kids, it's tough. That's the hardest part. You know, Pokemon is not my full-time job, so it's hard. I can't really justify it the same. So, let's see. JT says, "Damn, I just figured all that was pre-recorded." No, I rant. I get on my soapbox and I just rant. That was a good rant though. I was winded after that. Winded from talking. It's true though. It's like, what does it look like when you run a mile? It's like, well, it's just yelling into the camera for 59 minutes. Um, uh, let's see. So Sean C says, "Do you think the current generation of collectors started in Sword and Shield era don't have enough history of the ETBs and flows of collectibles, and that's causing the fair regard and hold in product?" So I don't think I don't. This is the thing. New collectors, I don't think there's a fear of holding product. In fact, I think there's a lot of people out there that really reinforce that, buying sealed product is a good investment. I think the problem is with the newer collector, like when you are really going after sealed product, when you talk to most people, they're only going to go after certain items. And I always say this, I don't think in the history people talk about Pokemon and they talk so much about the sets when it comes to some of this modern stuff. I think they're going to talk about the items and what is the best items from a set. Like, and for most of those sets, the best item is usually booster boxes. Sometimes it's ETBs, but it's most of the time booster boxes. Or you could just have like great one-off products. Great example, we talked about Scarlet or Sword and Shield when new collectors came in. Great Sword and Shield product. Sword and Shield 001 promo with the Pikachu and the Score Bunny, Sobble, and Grookey artwork in the background. It came in the Sword and Shield figure collection box. It was like the first ever collection box released from Sword and Shield. Amazing promo, knockout promo. Like that is going to be that was a great product. That product was, carried just by that promo. And then the same thing with Sword and Shield. Sword and Shield's easy, Sword and Shield, so you got booster boxes. Rebel Clash ETBs were super hot because they never got reprinted, but still, if you got Rebel Clash booster boxes, you did fine. Rebel Clash 3-pack blisters, beautiful Rayquaza artwork, absolutely love that artwork. Darkness Ablaze, kind of just pretty much booster boxes, not really much else there. I mean, I guess the check lane blisters with the Pikachu for Darkness Ablaze was pretty good. Like, that's a solid promo. Those check lane blisters are going to do pretty good. Vivid Voltage had a couple decent artworks to it. So for Vivid Voltage, really got to go after booster boxes. But 3-pack blisters for Vivid Voltage with the Vaporeon, super great. Vaporeon check lane blisters were not bad. Like had pretty good artwork to it. Battle Styles is probably going to be booster boxes. Check lane blisters with the Charmanders were pretty good, and you could do this for every single product, and like you just go down the line. But like if you hear me when I mention a lot of stuff, while yeah, some of these had good 3-pack blisters, some of them were figure collection boxes, which kind of one-offs. Some of them were single check lane blisters. There is sort of one like consistency that goes with all those is the booster boxes. Now the problem is what Sean C kind of asked is, do you think that the current generation collector started Sword and Shield era didn't have enough history of he said ETBs, but like the sets? The problem is they were probably just buying everything. So, there's products out there like Electroid V boxes, Dragonite V boxes, like super, super underperforming. You look at pack selection of some of this stuff, you look at the promos in some of this stuff, they're just underwhelming. Especially some of like the Pokemon Go products too, super bulky to ship, and they're just not great. That's a problem. So what happens is the new collectors, because they're new, they just want to buy everything. So all the crappy, I'm pretty sure, what was it? What's the teapot one? The I'm saying poltergeist. What the hell is a teapot? There's like a, I forget. There's like a freaking crappy promo. Like that was a collection box, even though that was still Champion's Path had those, I think. Wait, no, was it Champion's Path? Yeah, I think Champion's Path had that as the promo. Or no, Champion's Path had the Woolo promo. But still, it's like I confused it. I said the wrong Pokemon, but I definitely think there was still that Poltergeist or whatever his name is promo box, which will do terrible in the long run. At least when you compare that product at the same time, else was available on the shelves? That product's going to be do super terrible. But I mentioned Champion's Path accidentally, and you look at that Wooloo box, and then you say, well, what's going to do better, that collection box or the price disparity between the ETB with the beautiful Charizard artwork in it? And yes, one of those boxes is $20. The ETB was $49.99. But even taking into account like the prices, in the long run, which is a product I'd rather be sitting on for Champion's Path? That Wooloo box, or do I want to fucking sit on the Champion's Path ETB with the Charizard artwork? It's like, well, I feel more comfortable with the Charizard artwork, and especially if you're picking up 10 of those ETBs, you're keeping them in a sealed case, versus you got to pick up those collection boxes. It's going to be 6 collection box per case. That case is going to be super big. It's going to take up a lot of room. It's not really worth it. And so that's the thing. It's like the new collectors are going to buy everything. The seasoned collector's only going to buy what they like, and that's a problem too, is there's a lot of the mindset for people. It's just like, well, I still want one of everything, but I'm an investor, so I'm going to buy cases of everything, and end up like sitting on a lot of these products which aren't going to be like great returns on their investment for them. And then in the future, a lot of these collection boxes are going to look at like an Electrode V box and go, well, how much does this freaking thing cost to ship? I picked this up at Walmart on the shelf at $19.99 because I was a new collector and I thought that every single Pokemon product I bought was this great investment. And fast forward 3-4 years into the future, they're going to say, well, how much does this cost to ship? And they're going to go, okay, well, this maybe in 5 years that collection box goes up a decent amount of money. Let's just say it doubles. They're into that for $20 for the next 5 years. It doubled in price. That's 100% gain. That's great. You take into account eBay fees, you take into account how much it's going to cost to ship that collection box. People are like, shit, that didn't work out. So then what you got to do? Then you got to start to cannibalize down these products. So then you got to sell these packs individually. You can't sell the promos. The promos not worth shit. The jumbo nobody wants. So now you're just sitting on 4 mediocre packs of some random set loose. Nobody's going to want to buy your loose packs anyways, because they're just going to see you as a person with that nobody knows. They're just going to assume they're resealed. Then what happens? You sit on these packs for 5 years. You got 4 loose packs of some mediocre Sword and Shield set, and you're like, shit, really could have did better things with this money. And then you're going to look at the same products during the same timeline and go, really should have just took this $20, probably bought something else. So that's a long-winded answer, but like that's the problem that new generation of collectors are going to have, is they're going to look at their collection. And that's the thing too, is one of the things I try to reiterate on this channel all the time is, one of the hardest things you're going to have to do as a collector, investor, flipper, whatever you are, is you're going to have to, like, in a way, audit your collection and say, well, does my collection, does it have collection identity? Does it have, like, am I happy with the stuff I own? And if your answer is no, you're not happy because you got a bunch of shitty collection boxes that you don't want, and you really wish you had the booster box instead, or you really wish you had the ETB, and you're like, should have just bought the ETB, should have just bought the booster box, should have just bought that 3-pack blister. So when you have that and you look at it and you're like, man, I don't like my collection enough. My collection could have been so much better. I just was buying the wrong products, and I maybe even at the time you're like, I knew that there was better buys out there. I knew I should have why did I buy 6 of these fucking boxes? They're doing nothing for me, and that's the problem. So the new collector, the new generation, it's just going to take time, but eventually that new collector will get there. So, and I think that does cause part of the fear. That new collector looks at their, you know, collection, their investment, and their closet is stacked to the ceiling with a bunch of, you know, Dark Sylveon boxes from Celebrations, and stacked to the ceiling with a bunch of, you know, Lance's Charizard from Celebration boxes, and they're like, the Dark Sylveon's probably not going to do great. The Lance's Charizard only does good when you break it down, you grade that promo. I should have just broke them all down, you know, had the packs individually, sold the packs as lots, graded those Lance's Charizards. You know, for a while the promos were doing pretty good. Anything that wasn't worth it to sell, should have sold those. But instead of having any Dark Sylveon boxes, instead of having any Dark Charizard or Lance's Charizard boxes, I should be looking at that same closet, and every shelf should have just been a Celebrations ETB. I never should have bought a single one of these crappy collection boxes. I think that's a problem that new collectors eventually are going to come into. Now, this is the thing. Are any of those products like bad buys inherently? No. Like, they've all gone up. They probably all have made money. They're all doing good. It's just like, what would you rather have? Would you rather ship one ETB for the same price it costs to ship one of those collection boxes? And most people will say, well, I'd rather ship the ETB because the ETB is going to sell for a greater dollar amount. The profit margins are still going to be the same. It's still going to be worth it. So I think that is maybe a part of the fear that these new collectors have. They're just looking at this shit and they're going, damn it, should have bought ETBs, should have bought booster boxes. The reason I say that is because I see some photos, you know, like I look at some people's photos and I'm like, ooh, that's a nice collection. Liquidation is going to suck for these people. Not going to be fun, you know. And that's the thing too, is the thing about a booster box too is, you know, you might have, maybe even if the gains percentage wise, which not normally the case, but let's just say the gains are not as good as one of these collection boxes. Liquidity is still going to be super high on a booster box, and to ship that is still going to be like one of your cheapest ways to ship a sealed product. You know, when you think about it, most compact, easiest to ship, a little bit of bubble wrap, small box, booster box, you know? So, but this is the thing, some of those people, the people that are the newer collectors who might have the fear of the future, they might have never sold a single product in their entire life. Or if they have, they've only ever sold singles. They've only ever sold graded cards. They've never actually even shipped like a product. They don't even have the inventory of boxes and stuff to ship these. You know, all they might have been working with is just bubble mailers and stuff. Listen, I find myself in this position all the time. I do not keep an active inventory of like boxes to ship sealed products. So when I do get like that one-off product I do have to ship, I more or less like kind of wait for a freaking box to just kind of magically appear through like one of my wife's Amazon purchases or something. But that's not something I dabble in though. I don't dabble in that end of the market. Because I've learned that a long time ago, what not to do for stuff like that. I'm looking down at the chat. Let's see. Kai JKY said, second mortgage for Starry Night Moonbrand. It will be something, all right. It will be crash and burn type situation. Okay. I jumped to the bottom. Listen, appreciate every single one of you guys. All you guys that held in for that long ass rant. That was a long rant. That was one of the better ones. But I appreciate every single one of you guys. Do me a favor. If you go down below. So, I do want to talk. Danny said those celebration boxes do have one pack of Evolving Skies also. Also true. So, that is actually a great point. But I think that kind of just goes back and maybe talks more about like why that box in the future might need to get cannibalized down. Because this is the tricky thing. While that Evolving Skies pack is in there, you might actually look at like, okay, well, what if I cannibalize this product down opposed to selling it as what it was, which was a sealed product, you might go, well, this sells for $40. But the Evolving Skies pack in the future, maybe it sells for 15, and you're like, I could just take this one pack out and sell this one pack alone for $15, and then I still have all the celebrations. It actually might make sense in the future to cannibalize that product down, because you actually make more money that way, especially when you have a product like Evolving Skies. A lot of times people don't value the packs inside some of these collection boxes as strongly as they do when they're raw, and it's just something to think about. Now, product, that was just one example, kind of go off on a little bit of a tangent. Like, that product might not play out exactly the same, where it's cheaper to cannibalize it down to sell that product, but it's kind of just a long-winded. This is what happens when you do lives. You just kind of start talking, you don't know what's going to happen. Chef says, do a 24-hour rant into the new year. I can't do that. But, yeah, so I do have a live coming up on Friday. We're gonna have Beerski on the channel. I got to meet Beerski down in Charlotte Collecticon. He vended down there. Great dude. I think a lot of you guys are really gonna enjoy that conversation. He's got a great attitude. I think that's something that is as vital to this hobby as anything else. Is just getting people, surrounding yourself with good people, surrounding yourself with people with great attitudes. Again, great attitude. Can't wait to talk to him. I'll probably go live once before Friday, maybe go live either Wednesday or Thursday night. Not sure yet. But either way, appreciate every single one of you guys. JumbleFit says, PK went from ending the stream to another rant. Nailed it. As always, appreciate every single one of you. And I'll catch you on the next video. Hit that like button.